That's how security works, and still to this day in a lot of organisations, which is the antithesis of what it should be.
Okay.
My role in security is to be as uninhibitive as possible, to be as transparent as possible. So I should not touch you in any way, shape, or form in terms of preventing you from doing your job. But I should also be completely open about what we're trying to achieve and why, and what that means from a business perspective and what you're trying to be. So be the antithesis of the ivory tower, the classic security hand grenade. Here's a policy that no one reads apart from the poor schmuck who had to proofread it, and just try and inhibit people. So, nowadays it's about kind of, tell me what you do. What are you here to do? What's your role? How do you do that? What tools do you use? What are you trying to achieve? What are your drivers? What's your mission? What's your North Star you're going for? What do you do on a daily basis?
So given the increase in cybercrime, how is the position of cybersecurity changing in your company? So, has ransomware and its ability to affect the way that companies can trade changed the priority of cybersecurity compared to maybe GDPR that we were all focused on a few years ago, or are they all of equal importance and it's just getting more and more work? Kerry, we'll start with you and we'll go around the board.
The short answer to that is no, it doesn't really change much.
Okay.
I think you have to look at the risk that you have at the time. It depends on where you are in your journey, largely. So I think if it's become a big focus and people are talking about it, but it's always kind of been a problem. Since, I suppose, COVID and more people working remotely, it's something that more people are focusing on, which makes it seem like a bigger problem than it is. But I think if you have your good security hygiene, it's not necessarily something that you have to get too excited about, is my position on it.
Okay, excellent. Phil?
I've always worked in financial services, so it's always been a priority for the business. I think the thing that has changed is just how non-security people are now a lot more aware of security. So whether you're a board member, 10 years ago, the board weren't really talking about cyber much. But also, people in the business, like software engineers, 10 years ago, it wasn't a huge topic. Whereas now, application security and making sure that you're really developing secure code, that is pretty much the norm for most organisations. So I think that's the big change. Less the security team, but all the stakeholders around it.
Great.
Yeah, I think I'll just add to a couple of points there. So I've had the fortune, privilege, whatever you want to call it, of working in different sectors, so across financial services, across technology, media, telecoms, in practice, retail, and more recently within e-commerce. And the one thing that's remained the same, certainly over the last 10 years, is to the point about boards and their understanding of cybersecurity. It has really, really changed, right? It's changed in ways that are only good in terms of an acceptance and understanding of what we're doing and why we're doing it. There's always been regulatory focus. I think that's a given. If you think about whether it's GDPR, as we were talking about earlier, whether it's PCI compliance, whether it's HIPAA, SOX, we are just have so many different contractual obligations that we have to comply with. Those are generally not up for discussion, right? The other thing that I think that certainly has changed is the immediacy of information that we have access to. So if you think about 5-6 years ago, we just wouldn't be engaging with social media in the way that we are now. So when we talk about, breaches, losses of confidentiality, that stuff is happening here and now and present. You're consuming it all the time. So there's never a time when you're going about your business and not either coming on the back of a public notification of a breach, a loss of confidentiality, a compromise. We certainly, I work with NEDs, executives who are generally really, really aware. So they understand that something which is generally nebulous and most people don't understand is the difference between, doing well and going through a difficult time within any organization. So I think that's helped massively. But I think the challenge has always been the case. So whether you're working in a highly regulated business or working with lots of, PII data across different sectors, you're still up against the same set of challenges.
I hear that, Manohar, but it's not everywhere, right? I think there are. It sounds like you're privileged to work with some execs who get that. I'm not saying that mine don't, but I've been places where sometimes it's like those guys down in the dark room will deal with it all. I think it is important that everybody gets exposure to it and understands it. And I think that plays to Phil's points about it has become a bit more pervasive in awareness, right? It's a bit more everywhere. So I agree with that.
Yeah, and I think that the only point I'd add to that is, I was at a advisory council board earlier, and they were talking about just the levels of awareness across boards and NEDs. It's almost becoming statutory that they have to have a level of cyber expertise. You'll know that in the role that you fulfill, your responsibilities. I get to see that. I get certainly CFOs coming to me and saying, on the back of recent attacks, even before they've gone mainstream, oh, what are we doing about this? How are we protecting ourselves? These are from CXOs who even a few years ago just wouldn't be engaging in that level of conversation because it's somebody else's issue. Somebody else is taking care of it. Yeah,
well, a few years ago, your only engagement with the CFO was hoping that you had a cyber attack just before budget season, right?
to get your monies, right?
Exactly. Cool. Ed?
Or to be fair, to get the person who replaces you to get some money.
You felt that pain, right, Ed?
Yeah, too right. I've always followed in. It's much easier that way. Just blame the other guy. So I mean, in general agreement in terms of kind of that awareness thematically, I think I would also temper it with that cybersecurity is an industry that's generally predicated by fear. It's very much like if you look at kind of home security in the US, it's predicated on something bad is going to happen. It's going to be absolutely catastrophic. So spend some money. Spend some money, buy my widget, buy my next generation. We're top right in the Gartner Magic Quadrant or the Forrester Wave, or our analysts say you must do X, or it's going to be Hackmageddon. And reality is something completely different from that. The majority of the internet is absolutely fine, perfect, really good. There are bee dragons out there. But we largely live on kind of driving a message. GDPR was another classic example. How many people remember kind of when GDPR was coming, people actually put countdown clocks on there, right? Countdown. What's that for? The whole reason is you're going to spend money with them as a consultancy or to buy their magic GDPR certification, which didn't actually exist. They're going to spend money with them. The large part, I think, that's starting to change is a bit more pragmatism and actual risk conversations. Where we can really get between, yes, there is a worst case scenario, and we as security people are sometimes the worst for it, as the boy who cried wolf. This might happen. There might be a tsunami in Gloucestershire, but the likelihood is actually there's going to be some localised flooding. And what we need to do is prepare for localised flooding, because that's got a really high likelihood and a low impact, but it's going to have an actual business impact. Yes, catastrophe can happen, but I think we're still waiting for that kind of a business has actually gone under completely, but it's still put there as a spectre that, oh my God, your entire business could be gone. And I'll always temper and say, the more we understand risk, the more we can have pragmatic and honest conversations rather than theoretical kind of worst case scenarios.
So that's great if you're, as Manohar and Phil were saying, talking to a more educated audience, right? But the There Be Dragons, right, which wasn't a great Welsh accent, I have to say, Ed. But, actually...
Whose coat is this jacket?
That was better. Wasn't it the CISO's job to every new person in a company to just scare the living bejesus out of them? Isn't that how security works?
That's how security works, and still to this day in a lot of organisations, which is the antithesis of what it should be.
Okay.
My role in security is to be as uninhibitive as possible, to be as transparent as possible. So I should not touch you in any way, shape or form in terms of preventing you from doing your job. But I should also be completely open about what we're trying to achieve and why, and what that means from a business perspective and what you're trying to be. So be the antithesis of the ivory tower, the classic security hand grenade. Here's a policy that no one reads apart from the poor schmuck who had to proofread it, and just try and inhibit people. So, nowadays it's about kind of, tell me what you do. What are you here to do? What's your role? How do you do that? What tools do you use? What are you trying to achieve? What are your drivers? What's your mission? What's your North Star you're going for? What do you do on a daily basis? How do I piss you off? Because I know I do. Trust me. Even if it's just that I phone you up because you've reported a phishing email and I can literally smell the fear over the phone because security rang you up. You know, my job's to tell you that I'm a human being. We're all together to actually make the business successful. So how can I help you do your job?
Well, that's really great.